Our July edition of our monthly webinar series for small business connecting for success. I'm Barbara Coffey, Director of Economic Initiatives for the City of Tucson. Today, we'll hear about ways to support businesses looking to create long-term sustainability as we talk to the team at Project Equity about creative ways to do just that. We will take your questions as we go, so feel free to enter them in the chat or the Q&A function. We'll get to as many of those as possible in our time together this afternoon. We will keep all participants muted since we do have a large number of attendees, but we will record the session as well, make it available for everyone. Usually it's available in the afternoon tomorrow. You'll find links to this and all the previous webinars at connecttucson.com. So let's get started. Annie Palacios joins us today from Project Equity. Annie is the Business Engagement and Partnership Manager with Project Equity. She's well-versed in strategic client engagement and business development outreach, having consulted for multiple industry sectors across the globe. She worked for the UK government from 2013 to 2018, developing relationships with investors and providing business advisory services to support expansion projects and promote job growth. In prior roles, she worked with financial institutions in North and Latin America, and those during her tenure with a London-based think tank is when she did all of that. She holds a Master of Arts in International Relations from London Metropolitan University and a Bachelor of Arts in Political Science from Texas A&M University, Corpus Christi. At Project Equity, she creates and nurtures collaborative partnerships to drive forward structured programs and raise awareness about employee ownership. So we'll start with Annie today. Welcome, Annie. I'm going to turn it over to you so you can give us some background, and then we'll introduce Ramon after that and talk about some Tucson-specific opportunities and experiences as we go forward today. So Annie?
Great. Thank you so much, Barbara, for that lovely introduction. I'm going to start sharing my screen with you all. So let me go ahead and do that. Okay. All right. All right. Okay, perfect. Hopefully everyone can see my screen now. So first of all, I just want to say I'm super excited to be here today on behalf of Project Equity and talk to you today about employee ownership as a possible succession planning option for you all and touch on all of the great benefits that it can bring to you and your business. I also want to say before I kick off the presentation that I'm super excited as well to be able to bring to you all our business support services that we provide at Project Equity with our new partnership with the City of Tucson and Connect Tucson as well. So today we will cover what employee ownership is, our process, how it works at Project Equity, and its benefits that it can bring to you all. Okay. So that's me again. I'm Annie Palacios, Business Engagement and Partnership Manager at the organization. So, having a little technical difficulty here, you can bear with me. Okay, so before I get into the meat of the presentation, I want to go through a quick agenda for you on what we will cover for today. So we will cover the need for succession planning for business owners to get started early, and employee ownership as a possible solution for you and your business. We will go ahead and define what employee ownership is, as well as look at some advantages that it can bring to you and your business and your workforce. We will go through some examples of the models of employee ownership, and we will also look at some businesses that have successfully transitioned to employee-owned companies. We will go through the transition process itself. So really how we work from soup to nuts to get privately held businesses to employee-owned entities. And then any questions that we haven't gotten to, we can answer those as well in a Q&A session at the end. So I'll just start by giving a brief overview of who we are at Project Equity and what we do to help business owners. So first and foremost, Project Equity, we are a national nonprofit organization. We do have a physical presence in the Bay Area of California, but we have staff like myself who are based all across the states. And really our expertise is education and raising awareness on employee ownership. We want as many folks to hear about this best kept secret and what it is to help you in your business. We have a lot of different partnerships with municipalities across the states, like the great city of Tucson, to really ramp up awareness about employee ownership. And other like-minded organizations as well see the value that this type of solution can bring to keep businesses rooted in local communities. So our mission, if you will, is threefold. So we see employee ownership as a way for owners to get a fair sale price for their business, for workers to keep and retain their quality jobs, and for businesses to be preserved in their local communities where they reside. Okay. So as a succession planning, we see employee ownership as a viable way to plan for your succession. So with succession planning, we know at Project Equity that you have many options at your doorstep, and the traditional ways that you are probably very well aware of, being acquired by an outside buyer, selling to family members, those could be possible ways to do things and plan for your succession. But employee ownership is a really, really good way for you to consider in terms of keeping your business, that the blood, sweat, and tears that you've created with your business, to really keep that and preserve it for the long haul. And it's becoming increasingly popular with business communities and cities as the strategy to keep the businesses rooted locally and to keep the local strong economy going strong. So again, we're really excited at Project Equity to have partnered with the city of Tucson to support your regional businesses through employee ownership. And again, it's going to the heart of what we hold dear at Project Equity, which is, providing you as owners with a market rate return on your business, that quality jobs we want your workforce to have for years to come, to like where they work, to boost workers' productivity, and again, to really contribute to strong local economies. Now, employee ownership. So, we've heard the word, you've heard the term, but what is it exactly? And in its most simplest definition, employee ownership is a sale of a business or the business's assets or its stock to a new entity whereby the employees are now the owners of that business. So again, going to the heart of all of the ways that employee ownership could be of value to you and your business. It's a way for an owner to sell the business at a market rate while helping the employees really to give them the opportunity to build their assets, to build wealth through an ownership stake of the company. So other benefits can include reduced staff turnover, so keeping your workforce intact, and also boost the financial resiliency of the business itself. So initially, when we started our work at Project Equity back in 2014, we were faced with a crisis of what we termed the silver tsunami crisis. And that's essentially a way of us describing the many baby boomer owners who were near retirement age. Ultimately that drove that tendency for them to want to retire was ultimately putting their businesses at risk of closing up. So we were figuring out, okay, how do we navigate this? How do we offer an opportunity for these folks to preserve their legacy once they retired? So we were faced with that and how to deal with that particular crisis at the time. And while that is still happening, we were dealt with another blow of the COVID-19 pandemic. And in learning how to navigate that through that pandemic, we understood as well that not only could employee ownership be a useful tool to help owners plan for their exits, it could also be a useful tool as well for economic recovery, for business recovery, and worker retention as well. So still dealing with two crises at hand, but employee ownership can be a really useful way to tackle them. So how does this relate to Arizona? And does it relate to Arizona? So yes, it absolutely does. And I'll go ahead and show you a few stats that we have done in a data study relating to the specifics of the impact of small business in Tucson. So we at Project Equity were really big on data to show that the proof is in the pudding with employee ownership. And through a study that we did that involved privately held businesses in Tucson that have at least 10 or more employees, we found that 2,000 businesses with at least 10 or more employees are 20 years or older in operation. So longstanding businesses that have really boosted the economy of Tucson. These businesses generate $16 billion in revenue, and they employ 60,000 workers in Tucson. So again, a really good opportunity to utilize employee ownership. Okay, so again, going to the stats and numbers and what's out there. So again, we at Project Equity want you to know all of your options. And as you're nearing retirement, you might think, okay, well, I could just always put up my business to sell, on the market, and it'll sell just like that. And, often to the contrary, selling a business is really easier said than done. We have found that less than a quarter of businesses that are put on the market to sell in reality actually do. Okay. And even less than that, so about 15% of these businesses transition intergenerationally, so to a family member. And 1 in 5 of these businesses are already at risk of closing up. So again, it's a lot of work to navigate, and employee ownership could be a good way to continue on your legacy and preserve the state of your business. So understanding your succession options. Again, the most common ways that you might be aware of include being acquired or selling to your son or your daughter. And those are viable ways, and those do happen in terms of passing on your business to the next owner. However, we see employee ownership as a way that ticks off all of the right boxes for you. So the preservation of legacy of your business. Again, all of the blood, sweat, and tears that have gone into building your business from the ground up. That market value, you will be able to achieve a good sale price for your business. You will be able to avail yourself of some tax benefits with some of the models. You will be able to retain that all-important workforce that have been with you for many years, and will still be there to keep your business going forward in the later years. So okay, it's great to hear the stats, and it's good to hear a little bit about what employee ownership is, but let's really go to the advantages. So employee ownership, we know that it creates strong businesses, but it also creates strong communities. So again, looking at the data points and what's out there, according to the Democracy at Work Institute, profit margins are higher, 8.5% higher, in fact, in employee-owned companies than in the traditional counterparts. The sales and employment rates grow at 2% faster per year in employee-owned companies. Fewer layoffs occur in employee-owned companies, and that's really crucial right now, especially when you hear that companies are having a hard time keeping staff on. And we have found that in employee-owned companies that fewer layoffs happen there. So that's a really, really good point to make in our current climate. Also, better earnings. So employees who work at employee-owned companies earn more. And so according to the case for employee ownership that we've cited here, we have $2 more per hour are achieved in employee owners in cooperatives, and 53% higher incomes are attained among employees in ESOPs. So again, you can see there in that nice graph, you know, exactly how the numbers line up. And finally, this is a really notable fact here to highlight, just saying during the pandemic, employee-owned companies outperformed other companies by retaining jobs at a 4-to-1 rate. So again, this was in a study by the Employee Ownership Foundation and Rutgers University that really speaks to the heart of how employee ownership can help companies sort of weather economic downturns and really thrive in challenging times, to say the least. So again, I've touched on a few of these, but I'm going to bring up some other unique benefits here of employee ownership. So owners can achieve a fair sell price. We know that. But they can also craft and customize their own exit timeline. So again, I speak with business owners all the time, and each one has different needs, different goals that they want, and different exit timelines. So with employee ownership, you can completely customize that timeline according to what your goals are. And then finally, that preservation of your legacy. This includes the culture that you've built at the company, the people that you employ, also the all-important client relationships, vendor relationships that you've built. Those will remain intact as the company transitions to an employee-owned one. So really important to highlight. So we've touched on some stats, a little bit on the current climate, the advantages. Let's move on into some of the models now, okay? So broad-based employee ownership. Now at Project Equity, this is what we focus on. Now broad-based is just a simple way of saying we want as many folks as possible to have the opportunity to become employee owners. So not just as with, you know, management buyouts, not just a select few on the upper management level, but for as many folks as possible to have the opportunity to become an employee owner. So at Project Equity, we have 3 different models that we support and we advocate for. So these are employee stock ownership plans, also called ESOPs for short, worker cooperatives, and employee ownership trusts, also called EOTs for short. Now, there's a lot of granularity here, so I'll touch on the main characteristics of each one for you. So with employee stock ownership plans, these function primarily like 401k retirement plans, whereby all of the shares of a company or a partial shares of the company are transferred to a trust that is held for and on behalf of the employees. Now, with ESOPs, we tend to recommend these models as a good fit for companies that are medium to larger size. So we would say about 40 or more employees and annual revenues of at least 4 million. And that's really because they're very tax advantageous models, but they do have high setup costs and maintenance costs because they are heavily regulated by the federal government. But you can have democratic principles built into them for the ESOPs. Now, with the worker cooperatives, these are 100% employee owned, and they already have democratic governance and profit sharing already built into the model. And the employee owners, they can elect, and many of them often sit on the board of directors, and they have a say in key strategic decision making. And with worker cooperatives, we recommend these as a good fit for companies that have, we say 12 or more employees based on our experience, and they're really good models for companies of all sectors of industry. And there are some tax advantages as well with the worker cooperative model. Now, with the employee ownership trusts, these also called EOTs, these are a trust structure that it's a very customizable and very bespoke structure where it exists to keep the business going in perpetuity. So for the long haul, where it won't be acquired by an outside buyer, and to really protect the employees' jobs. Again, we see this model similar to a worker cooperative in that it's a good fit for companies that have at least 12 or more employees. And also there's profit sharing built into this as well. One thing I will say with the EOTs is that they have little, if any, tax advantages for that particular model. So now that I've discussed the models, I want to just give you all some examples of companies that have successfully transitioned and become employee owned over the years. So Delta Pipeline. So this company, they are a construction business based in Long Beach, California, and they transitioned to an ESOP model in 2017. And the owner was just really surprised and pleasantly surprised at how becoming an ESOP really incentivized his workforce to just be inspired and to be productive and to really feel like they had a piece of the pie. And it really improved the overall culture. So I'll go ahead and move on to the other employee-owned company here. So A Slice of New York. Now, this is a worker cooperative example. So they are a very popular pizzeria based in the Bay Area of California, and they transitioned to worker cooperative back in 2017. And what's really, really special about this particular company is that they were able to distribute over $500,000 of profits with their profit sharing scheme to its employee owners in the first 2 years after becoming employee owned. And this really speaks to the economic security that a worker cooperative type model could bring to its workforce, especially, in such a high cost of living area like the Bay Area. So really, really important to note there. So again, if anything that I want you to gain from this presentation, it's really the advantages. I want to really hammer that home to you all today on employee ownership. So market price. So yes, owners will get a fair sell price for the business. And how we do that, which I'll touch on later on in the presentation, is we do that due diligence through a debt capacity analysis, which will determine a sale price for you. Then employee ownership delivers significant tax advantages where you as the owner and the business both benefit. The owner can control the process. So the owner drives the sale, the timing, how they really want to do this process to become employee owned. They're in the driver's seat. Employee ownership supports flexible financing, and I'll touch on that a little bit as well in the presentation. How a leveraged buyout, how these transactions happen is through a leveraged buyout, and this allows for that flexibility. And then finally, employee ownership strengthens local economies. So new employee owners will be able to build their assets, preserve their legacy, and keep their money in that local economy, ultimately keeping that local tax base very strong. Okay, so we've covered a lot of information already, but I'd like to walk you through how this transition actually happens in a practical sense. Okay, so what happens when the business is sold to become employee owned? So the sale of a business or its stock is sold to a new entity where the employees are now the owners. Now, this purchase is financed through a loan where the new entity's future cash flow pays down that loan going forward. Okay. And so what this ultimately does is this allows the selling owner to receive payment up front, and it keeps the operating business intact where it keeps thriving and operating as it had before. So financing the sale. So what comprises the financing elements? So typically, these are financed through debt, through loans to the business. So in general terms, a CDFI, so a community development financial institution, or a traditional bank, comprises about anywhere from 50 to 70% of the financing that is paid to the owner. And then the rest of the financing is comprised of some type of owner financing. So usually a seller's note in the amount of, say, anywhere from 30 to 50%. And so what this does is this allows, again, the owner to receive the amount that is financed at the time of the sale, and then agree to receive the remaining amount through future installments, again, from the new entity's future cash flow, to get that in future installments, as well as a bit of interest that's garnered during the loan period. So that could be anywhere from 5 to 7 years. So that's typically how this is done. And then just to say, with an employee ownership with the worker cooperative model, there is a small equity buy-in that also comprises a component of the financing. And it's just a nominal amount that is set. It's based on the workers' earnings. And it's just so that they feel that they have some skin in the game. And it's an amount that varies from a few $100s to some $1,000. But again, just to reiterate, that's a nominal amount that comprises financing for a worker cooperative. Okay. Yeah. There we go. Okay. So our transition process at Project Equity. So how do we start this process, basically? So I'll outline our what we call our client journey. So step one is the exploration education phase. So this is the part of the process where we have consultations that we offer to business owners, complimentary consultations, where we look at, is this a possible fit for you? We find out your goals and plans, and we see, if this is something that you'd really like to look into going forward. So that's the first phase. The next is feasibility. So the feasibility stage is where we do some due diligence, we do financial modeling of the business's financials, operations, and we really see, is this a viable solution for your business? And that's typically about a 2 to 3 month period of time. And then step 3 is the transition phase. So we support the deal structuring that's involved. We look at, how will the employee-owned business function as an employee-owned business? And also we provide a straw model as well of what the new employee-owned business would look like for you. Then we do a mini step, but a very important step, is we make sure that everything's buttoned up and ready to go before, before everything is signed and done. So we call that the closing the sale. And then finally, our last stage is what we call Thrive. And at Project Equity, we do, the education piece, the feasibility piece, the transition piece, but we also offer post-transition consulting services for up to 2 years, just to make sure that the employee owners feel, like they've wrapped their head around it, and the business continues thriving for years to come. So the feasibility process. So this is something that I'll just go into, again, not in granular detail, but just to give you the overview here on what happens in a feasibility with us. So the feasibility is where we do a debt capacity analysis to determine the potential business sale viability of your business, and also establish a sale price ceiling. So we come up with recommended sale prices for you, and really see if this is a viable solution for you to transition. Then we support initial employee engagement. So at the tail end of a feasibility, we start assessing the temperature of interest among your employees to see if this is something that they'd like to do. If they have any concerns, we address them. So that's part of the end of the feasibility. And then we understand any future management scenarios that might come up. So do you have an existing longstanding person who could assume some more responsibilities going forward? Do you have that really strong management staff and the needs that the business would have in place? Do those exist already, or do we need to solidify those better? And then finally, we do a report and we develop a straw model construct of what the employee ownership company would look like for you as well. And that's all part of the feasibility process. And then just to say as well, before I leave you my contact details and take some questions, is if you have any concerns or questions or doubts of like, well, I don't know if I'm on the fence, but I'm not sure if I'm ready to pursue this, please contact me. I'd love to have a conversation with you, but I'd love to leave you with some readiness factors for assessing if this is the right time for you to move forward, and just for you to have a think about these things. So for employee ownership, we would like you to think of these main criteria. So the first is, has the business been in good financial health? And we would say at least for the last 5 years. We know COVID hit many folks hard, and we understand that. So, but at least some steady profitability of the business. Do you have an experienced workforce? So do you have longstanding staff who you feel you trust to continue taking on more responsibilities, to continue being in the business? And also just to say as well, with headcount size, I touched on this earlier, where with worker cooperatives and employee ownership trusts, we see those as good models for companies that have at least 12 or more employees. And with ESOPs, 40 or more is often recommended. And then finally, a proven track record and a good reputation in your community. Have you been operating for many years in your community? So those are the key things. So profitability, a good experienced workforce, and years of operation in your business. So again, with our partnership with City of Tucson, we are so happy to be able to offer you our support services, and we encourage you to contact us. I do a lot of consults with business owners of all sectors of industry, and I'm really happy to open this up to your region. So please do get in touch with me. We have a really good team of folks who care about you and your business. So that's my information there. And yeah, happy to take questions now. Thank you so much, Barbara, again, for allowing me to speak on behalf of Project Equity.
Awesome. I appreciate that. And it has been very informative, actually. I was thinking about, and there came a question which will lead us into sort of some comments from our other guests today. But the question was, how many are there other employee-owned businesses here in Tucson? Have you gotten a sense from your data and research about the number that we might have in our community, our region?
Oh, wow, that's a great question. I don't know of the exact number. I'd love to find that out though, but I can say that I've spoken with a lot of people who are interested in the employee ownership models for all of the reasons I touched on. But a lot to speaking on the sustainability, we've had interest in food cooperatives in the region. And yeah, and I think it's something that is definitely on the minds of many people and many owners. But I will jot that down about the number and look that up because I'm interested. I'm sorry I don't have that offhand though.
No worries. We're going to hear from one right now. So Ramon Ganders has joined us. He is the Chief Information Officer at Tucson Asphalt Contractors. So Ramon, I'm intrigued because after hearing everything Annie has shared, there's certainly been some advantages, right, of forming the business the way that you have experienced. Can you describe a little bit about what you all went through as a company and how you made that determination or found that it was the right time to make that change? What was it like for you?
Absolutely. First of all, thanks for having me. Hopefully you can hear me clearly. To answer the question about local ESOPs, there's, I think, close to 100 local ESOPs that represent contractors, manufacturing, name some of the bigger contractors, Sunt Construction. The newest ESOP was Barrio Brewing. It came on board in 2019. And so there's a number of different companies, but back to the question about Tucson Asphalt. Yeah, this is my second employee-owned company I've worked for. This is a new transitioned company I'm working for. Previous one I worked for was already what we call a mature ESOP. So they have been in an ESOP for 10 plus years, 300 employees, and well established. But we transitioned our ESOP officially in December of 2020, which really fell on January 1st of 2020. We have 40, we actually at the time we had 35 employees, but we had we were in business for about 23 years at the time. And for of what the previous presenter stated, for us, it was about a succession plan. Our owner at the time did look at selling the company. And didn't like the offers that were provided. So he looked at as an ESOP to kind of keep that legacy, also kind of uphold the tradition of the company so that employees wouldn't lose their jobs potentially or shut the doors down. And who knows what happens to those employees at that time. So our owner decided it was strictly a succession plan. And so we had some folks on staff who had to be educated and go to ESOP conferences, across the U.S. to learn more about the financial benefits. But so we did it strictly for creating and keeping our legacy in Tucson as Tucson Asphalt.
So have you been able to see some of the benefits again already playing out? Is it productivity? Is it morale? What do you see has been sort of special for you all?
So what I really appreciate about ESOP companies is the word that was used earlier, but I stress the word with our employees all the time, and that's culture. It changes the culture because now that every employee has a stake in the game. I mean, we're talking from anything, not just from buying equipment for the construction industry, but how well we maintain our operating trucks and our building, because all of that goes to the bottom line. ESOP companies are mandated to pay a certain amount to the trust as described earlier, but doesn't mean that the company, if had a better year, can provide more. and that then gets shared to the employees, and the employees then get the benefit of it. And I think it's important to know that employees look at this strictly as a retirement plan. It's a traditional plan. And what's even greater in our standpoint of most traditional ESOPs is that it is 100% sponsored by the company. A 401k, as is traditionally compared to, an employee still has to put some of their own money toward it, where maybe the company matches or whatever. Well, ESOPs are not that way. It benefits employees who work with the company longer, because traditionally most companies take 6 years to become 100% vested. The first year it's 0%, and 20, 40, 60, 80, 100. And once you get to the 100%, then you're fully vested into that. And again, at no cost to the employee. And that's the greatest part, other than working, what we call working well, and meeting the requirements. The requirements for us are working 1,000 hours a year and being age 21 or more. And then they're eligible in that planned year, as we call it. So it absolutely has changed the mindset of how you treat a company and its equipment to what it is for your retirement, on top of other things that you could hopefully benefit that the company offers, like a 401k and other things. So it absolutely is a game changer, in my opinion. And I've seen it with 300 employees, and I see it now with 45 employees, and it's the same across the board. People really take pride and into what they're doing, because they recognize that it's basically, at the end of the year, something they get in return, as long as the company has a good year.
That's awesome. So for
Yeah.
either of you, I mean, in your experiences now, have you seen, are there any industries that make sense for this business model over others? What's more common? Can any business take advantage of a model like this? I know there were numbers, Annie, that you mentioned in terms of your surveys of 10 or more employees, but what's the type of business that might make sense for a model like this?
So I was just going to quickly say that I attend ESOP Association conferences around the U.S. I'm also actually on the ESOP Association's Public Policy Committee, which helps drive. We just started this committee, which helps drive exactly what Project Equity is doing to make it easier for companies to file paperwork with the Department of Labor and such to become an ESOP. But to answer the question specifically, the statistic around the U.S. is that every industry is represented in every state. But what I have found typically is construction and manufacturing. And I think that from my standpoint, has to deal with the hourly waged employees, where it benefits them because it's more stake in the game for them than and longer term, and wealth building, I think was mentioned before, things that typically our employees sometimes don't think about in construction specifically. We don't, it's not typically spoken about financial planning, but when you have an ESOP, now you have something to talk about and show them this is part of a retirement plan.
I would echo that it to the T. Actually, I was just going to say as well, with the ESOPs, we see them as a good fit for construction companies, for manufacturing companies as well. With the worker cooperative and the employee ownership trust, we've seen a wide range of industries fit those models, from consultancies, from, of course, like hospitality industries like restaurants, bakeries, solar industries. So those could be a fit for various sectors, but I would agree with Ramon here about the ESOPs being a good fit for construction and manufacturing companies.
I think the largest ESOP in the country, if I'm not mistaken, is a food distributor. So I mean, I think it's great that everyone can be represented, small companies, larger companies, because ultimately it's the same bottom line. It changes the culture, and it's a retirement plan. And I think that's the unique part about this. You could talk to, like I mentioned earlier, Barrio Brewing, very interesting understanding of their transition and how that's benefiting their employees now three, almost 4 years later. And so it's really great to hear what it has done for local businesses in town and what it means to change the landscape of our community.
Well, and I think you hit on it too, and something that's important to our own mayor and council when we think about Tucson and what is the essence of Tucson? Well, it's our legacy businesses. It's our businesses that are independently owned and operated, or again, that have created foundations for many, many families for here for generations, right? And how do you sustain that? How do you keep them thriving so that they can continue to create that positive impact? And so, so what pushes them to that moment, right? I mean, have you, in your experiences, Annie or Ramon, either way, have you seen where companies have not made that decision and really struggled to figure out what to do?
Yeah, I'm happy to start off here. Yes, Barbara, long story short, yes, we have seen that. And we, advise to just start the planning, your succession planning, what you want to achieve, really start early. I know that owners think they can live forever, and it's a baby they've built from the ground up, and they don't see themselves as not working, but eventually that day does come. So you want to plan early. And we speak to people who maybe are 5 years out from retiring, 2 years. Ultimately, with feasibility and the transition phase, we say allow for at least a year, before you say you won't be able to transition tomorrow, but allow for at least a year of time, and then you can phase out gradually as well. That's what's really good with these models too, is that you don't have to just leave and pack your bags and go. You can stay on in some capacity with the businesses too, and that really helps as well to make sure that that relationships stay intact, that you don't feel like you're abandoning anything. So
how do you?
Yeah, I was just going to say, that's exactly what's occurred at Tucson Asphalt. Our previous owner is still somewhat on board with the company. His contract expires, I believe, the end of this year. So it's up for negotiation whether he wants to stay on board or not. And so I think how it's set up is a unique conversation. But again, everyone is different. So for Tucson Asphalt, that was the way it was. Our previous owner, I think, or my other company, previous owner, I think sold, I believe it was 49% of the company right up front. And then the company had to pay the other 51%. And that took about 8 years to do. And for that, he was looking at retirement. Our owner, it's kind of the same thing. He was at that age, felt it was time. And this is what he did to kind of keep staying on board, but also kind of slowly phase himself out from being day-to-day operations.
Well, it's fortunate, and you've mentioned the partnership a few times, Annie, that we have had the American Rescue Plan funding to support our work with businesses right now to help them achieve more resiliency as they move forward. So I really want to think about, sharing with small businesses that the business counseling, the one-on-one counseling that you can provide on this topic is really essential, and it's a great opportunity to take advantage of in the coming months, right? Because I think you shared enough different options, and I think business owners are probably like, well, how do I choose the right one? And so you'll walk them through that. Can you give me a sense of what that counseling session might be like for a first-time business owner talking about this subject matter?
Yes, absolutely, Barbara. So yes, and just to echo what Ramon said, every business owner is different. And we've spoken to folks, and we continue to speak to new folks all the time who have different needs, different goals, different retirement plans, if you will, for themselves. So what we do is on our initial call, we talk you through if you need some more detail about any of the models, what could be a possible fit for you. We'll talk you through that. But we also really glean a lot from owners on that initial conversation. We want to hear about you and your business. We want to hear about your goals, what you are hoping to achieve with employee ownership. And so we have those initial conversations, Barbara, and then what we do as well is, you don't just have one conversation. We're open to having as many as necessary that you feel that you need to bring in. If you have other stakeholders in the business, if it's 2 owners, 3 owners, we like to have all of you on board and hearing your thoughts and your different goals. And so we have those conversations with you, and we really want to do our due diligence as well to make sure that this is the right fit for you, because we want it to fit everybody, but it may not be a right fit at this moment in time. It might be later on, but we like to start planning and educating early on as much as possible to see if this can reach as many of you as possible.
That's great. And because I know some of these can seem complicated, right? Or a business owner may be overwhelmed. They've got lots of other things they're trying to just solve for each day. And so planning often takes a back seat, right? So I think that is a key message. Try to carve out time for that so that you can start to explore some of these things that will really, really give you that peace of mind at the end of the day. So that's
my mindless plug for Project Equity is I spoke to them a couple of days ago for the first time. And when I told my team about that conversation, we all said, man, we wish we knew about Project Equity beforehand, because I think there were a lot of questions our staff had too that were maybe not answered through the means that we decided to move into employee ownership. So I think Project Equity is providing a really good opportunity. I'm really glad to see this partnership with the city, because I'm so supportive of ESOPs and what it does for our workforce and our community. So great partnership on the two of your parts. Congrats.
Oh, that's awesome. But you raised a point too, because it's also about educating the workforce too, right? If it involves everyone in the organization, then they all need to have some understanding and have that buy-in and feel comfortable about the path forward. So I think that's great. And I know that we'll be able to lean on you for that as well, Annie and your team. I want to make sure you put your information in the chat too, just so anyone might be able to reach out to you directly. That's certainly appropriate. We encourage all of our partners and those who are serving business owners, as well as the business owners themselves, to reach out so they can interact with you and have appropriate conversations, make referrals, whatever that might be. And then it's great to know that we have Ramon in the community, who is an expert on some of these things, is involved in a variety of work related to setting up this kind of business model. So that's great to have local experts as well. So I appreciate that. And I will, if there are burning questions out there, now is the time. But otherwise, you will be able to revisit this webinar, as I mentioned that we have recorded it. So with that, I'll wrap up our time together. I want to thank you both again for being here today. We will be back next month on Tuesday, August 30th at 3 p.m. Be sure to watch your inbox for the announcements and registration link. Let's keep you connecting for success. Don't forget, you can also call our City of Tucson Economic Initiative Small Business Assistance Line at 520-837-4100. You can also visit connecttucson.com for resources and to sign up for our email newsletters and updates. So with that, thank you all again. And I appreciate both of you being here. And thanks everyone for joining today.
Thanks for the invite.
Awesome.
My pleasure.
Have a great day.